Good morning, everybody. Congratulations on finding the new room. Is this exciting? Just for today? Yes. Well, heaven forbid we make things easy on you. All right, so, I have to check the schedule to see if they changed it again, but I think today is the only day we're in here. This is the only day? Okay, so this is the only day we're in this room. I like the pictures on the walls. That's pretty cool. There's not pictures in the other room, so that's an improvement. But this one feels a little bit snugger. But that's okay. We're a tight-knit group now at this point, so no worries there. Alrighty, so all kinds of exciting things going on today. We're going to be talking about the lighting and rendering aspect of your assignment. So we're really winding way down at this point for the class. We've only got one more lecture. But it has to happen. All good things come to an end, and as well as all awful things come to an end. So depending on your perspective on the class, it'll soon be over either way. In terms of today's lecture, we're going to be working with a file that you need to download from FSO. So if you go to your activity 10, you'll see that there's a file for you to download from there, and it's called something obscure like Lecture 10 Rendering Activity. So you're going to need that file. So do please sign into FSO and get yourself that file. And the good news is that file is exactly the same file as you will be using for your final assignment, where you're bringing in all the assets that you built this month. Well, not all of them, but 4 of them. And bring those in and put them onto the little desk in the environment that we've given you. And the environment has already been lit. In fact, it was lit by the guy who teaches the shading and lighting class. So he set that up for you guys so it'll look nice. So literally all we have to do is bring in 4 assets, any 4. Obviously, if you've UV mapped them, then you can create an AO pass and put that on there. So that is optional, though. You don't have to put an AO pass on objects that you put in there, but it can be any 4 modeled assets. There should not be any blockouts in there, so make sure you've got all modeled assets. It cannot be the jar, because that's sort of a teaching tool. That's not really something that shows really what you can do. So make sure you're using anything that you turned in weeks 1 through 3 for assets that you've modeled. So that's the stuff that you'll be bringing in for that project. You can't do duplicates of the same object, so I don't want to see like 4 clothespins. It's got to be 4 different things, so make sure you do that. And what's another important thing? Oh, please incorporate rules of physics in the universe as we understand it when you're putting these objects in place. So having, if you built the Lego man and having him hold up the 35 millimeter camera, yeah, it's not going to happen. So yeah, don't do that. Everything should adhere to physics as we understand it. And also nothing sort of falling or flying, because we do not have motion blur or anything like that at our disposal. Nothing is moving, so that looks very odd when you've got objects sort of floating in space. So everything has to be balanced and weighted properly and appropriately when you set up your scene. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, any 4 you wish, whether you UV map them or not, immaterial. But you can if you want. So we're going to be delving into that scene and how to utilize that scene, and we're going to get into manipulation of camera, all kinds of fun stuff like that, in order to help set up the scene to render out a final image. And what you will notice about the activity we do in class today is it is identical to what it is you're going to be doing for your week 4 assignment 2. So if you've got this down from the lecture, you're going to be Gesundheit, totally all set. Gesundheit 2. There's the 3rd one. I knew there'd be one more. There's people sneeze in 3s or 5s, I've noticed, if they're going to do more than one. So we will delve into that stuff today. And again, make sure you've got that file, Lecture 10 rendering activity file, you're going to need that one. All righty. So without further ado, let's get this party started. All right, here's lecture 10. All right, lecture 10, and I'm excited to be here because I was a little nervous I might not. I was having car problems yesterday. Let me tell you, I had to have like a running tab with Advanced Auto Parts because I think I have at least 9 or 10 batteries in the back of my car now. I'm gonna have to open a shop or something. All right, so lecture 10. Let's talk about rendering. Now, to kind of help you wrap your head around rendering, I got to talk about what's going on. Basically, when you're rendering, you're asking your computer to draw a picture for you, and that's what it's doing, drawing a picture of what you are looking at or what you will see in your final image. And these drawings take time, much like when you draw a picture, it takes time. When your computer is rendering, it takes time. And it's literally drawing everything you see. It's drawing the polygons, it's drawing the textures, it's taking into account all the lighting information because light is being calculated from a mathematical algorithm or formula, and we've got light that bounces off of things and it goes through things. There's reflection, refraction, there's all this stuff going on. Color information is transferred from one object to another through what we call radiosity from our world. But all these things are happening. All this stuff has to be calculated, and this all goes into what we call the rendering process. Now, just to give you an idea of rendering and what's going on, if you take a look here, I'm going to show you when we are inside of Maya. Hi, Maya. Good morning. When we are inside of Maya and we're just literally looking at a polygon object, this is a render. This is a drawing that your computer is making for you. It's drawing exactly what you see. And it does have, you know, some shadow and light information in there because we need to perceive depth, and that's how we do that. Highlight and shadow gives us depth. So this is a drawing. This is what we call a hardware render, meaning that the render is very simplistic. But the good news is we want it to be simplistic because the computer can draw it quickly. Because what happens is every time I change my perspective, literally and figuratively, as soon as I change that, the computer literally starts with the first drawing and then the last drawing, and it draws all the drawings in between to show the transition so that I can actually see in what we perceive as real time, a change of where I'm standing. Does that make sense? It's literally redrawing all of that stuff at a crazy rate of speed so that we perceive motion. It works like a flip book. You remember we were talking about that earlier in the class, like day 1 or 2? The idea that if you have a series of images and they're slightly different from one another, and if we present them in the right frame rate, the right rate of speed, your mind's eye perceives motion due to the phenomenon called persistence of vision. And as a result, we think it's being animated, when in reality, it's just a series of still images. Film projection works the same way. It runs through the projector, the images move past the shutter, and we perceive motion. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah? Hell yeah. There we go, okay. So what we're looking at here is your computer is drawing for you very, very quickly pictures of what you're seeing. And again, it's a more simplistic image that we're looking at, so it's able to draw it pretty quickly for us. And again, we call this a hardware render. Now, the reason you might be wondering, well, why do I have a picture of a guy taking a picture with a Polaroid camera? Because that seems kind of weird. But rendering is kind of like photography very much, because in terms of photography, what we're doing is we're taking light and we're squeezing it in through, and we're sort of projecting it onto a plane. And whether we're talking old school chemicals or whether we're talking digital, we are capturing that information and processing it. Digital is obviously faster. But how many of you guys remember Polaroid cameras? You guys remember those at all? You take the picture and it comes out, and you shake it because you think it'll develop faster. And what you're waiting for is all the little chemical reactions to take place, the silver halide crystals to sink in through the gelatin layers, to give us the highlight and the shadow. And the silver halide crystals respond to the various colors based on how they're set up, so that we can get the reds and the blues and the yellows. And all of that comes together, and it takes a little bit, but eventually, if you're not too close to the flash, eventually you get an image. So it takes some time for that image to evolve or develop, literally. And so that's what we're talking about, is the time that it takes for that picture to come to fruition is much like what we refer to as render time. And that's the time it takes the computer to actually draw what it is you see. And again, the idea is, again, there's your computer drawing a picture. It's going to draw a picture for you, and it will take at least 24 frames for 1 second. Often things refresh at a higher rate than that, up to like 60, before it starts to not be quite as obvious that the increase makes it any better. But it's drawing pictures for you as quickly as it can. And as I said before, if your drawing is a very simple drawing, it really doesn't take a whole lot of time to draw. That's pretty fast, right? But if I'm drawing something more complex, it's going to take a lot more time because I've got a lot more detail in there to figure out. So how that relates to your computer, the more polygons you have on the screen, the bigger your textures are, the more lights you have, the shinier the materials are. If you've got transparent materials, opaque materials, translucent materials, transparent to a certain degree and reflective, all of this stuff has to be calculated. And this all adds to what we call render time, or how long it takes the computer to draw the picture you see. Does that make sense? Okay. And there's different kind of rendering engines. And rendering engines, like we're using Arnold, but rendering engines basically are number crunching applications that basically take a look at what you're trying to render, and they figure out what everything is going to look like. And different rendering engines will give you different effects in terms of the drawings, much like, you can paint with watercolor, you can paint with acrylic. All these things have sort of a different look to them. So those rendering engines work differently from one another and can kind of give you a different look to things, much like a hardware render, a software render, rendering with Arnold, rendering with Mental Ray, rendering with RenderMan. There's a couple of different engines that you can utilize in order to do that. We're going to be using Arnold for ours. All right, so let's take a look at our actividad. Did everybody download their Lecture 10 rendering activity? Okay, please make sure you do that if you have not done so already. But let's take a look at that little activity. All right. Now, when you guys download it, no. Oh no, you probably need that. Nope. I'll do it this way. When you get to your when you get your Lecture 10 render activity, it will look like this when you download it onto your desktop. And you double click on it and it unzips. And then you will have a fun little scenes file called render activity, which of course for your final you will rename. But since this is the project I'm working on, and it is a self-contained project, it's got all the folders in there you need as well as the workspace file. You have to set your project to that file folder. So I'm going to go to File, Set Project, go to my desktop and find my Lecture 10 rendering activity. Set my folder to that. And then when I go to File, Open Scene, it goes right to my render activity. And that should put you right about here. Now, in terms of the different cameras you see, I'm not sure which ones you'll see when you happen to open your particular copy of Maya, but I just want you to know that we have many cameras in here. And one of the cameras that we've created for you is called the Render Cam. And literally, this is the camera that you render from. And the way I'd like you to think of the different cameras in Maya, most of the cameras are working cameras. Their whole job in life is to help you navigate through your scenes and build stuff and find stuff and all that kind of thing. So those are, again, working cameras. So what we did was we created a rendering camera, a special camera just for rendering. And you can create cameras very easily if you need to do so. Excuse me. If you go to, there are many places, but if you go to Panels within your panel menu, if you go to Panels, Perspective, New, you'll make a new perspective camera. You can make new orthographics as well, whichever one of those you happen to need. But in this instance, we made a camera for you called the Render Cam. And this camera is set up specifically for you to film your little scene with or take the little picture. And what we've done is we've put up a gate mask for you, and that's what this sort of gray material is out here, and that lets you know what's in and out of the shot. I know some of you have taken pictures before, and you've seen like little etchings on the glass that lets you know what's in and out of frame so that you can make sure people tuck in when you need to make sure they're fitting in the shot. So this little gray area lets you know, oh, okay, I see, that's where my shot is. So whatever you see within that, inside this box here, that's what your actual image will look like. So it's just sort of a guide for you. And again, there's different gate options you can use here, but we've already set this one up for you. Now, you'll notice that when you first get in here, you can't move your camera. Okay, and the reason is because your camera is currently locked. I often get questions from students, can I lock attributes? Is that something I can do? Absolutely, you can lock attributes. Make them unusable, inaccessible, and that kind of thing. So, and I can't tell you how many projects I get each month where this is the framing of the shot. And I'm like, so you forgot how to unlock your camera. and again, it's the first thing I talked about. So let's make sure we don't miss this. I need to unlock this camera so that I can utilize it. So the first thing I need to do is make sure I select the camera, because you have to select it to be able to unlock it. Now, in terms of selecting the camera, you can see I'm in my render cam right now. And if I go to View, right up at the top, you see Select Camera. And that's what allows you to select the camera Gesundheit you're actually looking in. All right. Now, once I have my camera selected, I'm going to make sure I have the channel box open, which again is this icon way over here in the far right. And you'll notice that there's sort of a little gray coloration in here, right? Right next to the numbers, it's gray. And that's how Maya tells you, hey, these attributes are locked, because you can lock some and not others. The gray ones are locked, and that's why I can't move my camera. So in order to access the camera, I have to unlock it. And the steps for unlocking your camera are, first, highlight the attributes with the left mouse button. Whatever attributes are locked, doesn't make any difference. Highlight them with the left mouse button. Not the numbers, but the attributes themselves. Make sense? Highlight the attributes with the left mouse button. Now, once those are highlit, all you have to do is hold down your right mouse button, and you'll see there's a little section called Unlock Selected. Interestingly enough, right below, Lock Selected. So can I lock things? Can I unlock things? Absolutely. So you just choose Unlock, and then now that everything is unlocked, that gray has gone away. Whee! Now I can navigate. Yes?
Is this also a way so you can put reference into your reference in so you can make sure you don't click on it or
It wouldn't keep you from being able to select it, but it would keep you from being able to move it. Does that make sense? I have had instances where I basically took my reference image and put it on a piece of geometry physically rather than an image plane. And then I can lock it so it won't move no matter what. But I could also create a layer and put it on a layer and then make that layer a template. And then that also makes it make it a reference, and then also makes it so I can't move it. So there's a number of different things you can do to keep things from being moved or tinkered with. And that's why I show you guys this stuff so you can kind of see what Maya can do. But once you've got that all set, now I can move around so I can figure out what's going on in terms of setting up my shot. And we're going to talk more actually next class about some of the ideas of how to set up a really interesting shot, because there's definitely a whole other world of how do I make this look awesome, because that's definitely our job. Not only do we have to make great models or great animations or great compositing jobs, whatever it is you do, it doesn't make any difference. It's all going towards making pretty rectangles. So we're going to talk about that next class. How do I make a pretty rectangle? Because otherwise no one's going to see my stuff. But we'll talk about that next time. But what we're going to talk about this time is how do I frame this up nicely and render it, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we can make adjustments, little ones, to quality to try to make things look a little bit better. Because much like when you're writing a paper, rendering workflow is very similar in that you start very rough and then you kind of work your way towards better, more complex, and final. Does that make sense? Because it doesn't do you any good to start with your best handwriting and, on your rough draft or whatever it is you're writing. There's no point to spending your best effort on that, because at first you're still trying to figure out what it is you're doing. And then as you get a much better idea of where you're going with the thing you're writing, then you can get into greater refinement. And then you put forth your best effort when you get to that last one, the one you're turning in. Rendering is much the same way. Since render time is a lock and you can't do anything about it, it's a great idea to work with sort of more of a rough draft at first so that you can make changes and quickly see how those changes are affecting. And then once you get closer to what you want, now we up the quality. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay. So rendering workflows are much like that. Now, you do have to have Arnold already activated, which we did last class, but just a quick reminder, you want to go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and make sure you have switched on the M2A bundle, MTOA bundle, because that's the Maya 2 Arnold bundle, and you have to have that clicked on in order to have access to the Arnold rendering engine. Window, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager. All right, so make sure you've got that turned on because we need it. All right, now in terms of finding a good shot, again, we're going to talk more about great composition next class, but just realize that, we've got this really fun scene. There's already some lights in here. That's one, this is another light, there's a light in there. So that stuff's been taken care of for us. And again, we've got this nice little desk here that's been built in advance for us. We put the pepper mill in there, but obviously you're going to put your models in there for your final turn-in. But think of the desk as like a stage. It's been set for you, and the models that you've built are the actors that are going to tell the story of this month. So what you're going to do is set up your objects in this environment here, and again, have a nice shot, like a poster that would make somebody want to come see this movie, the movie of your stuff. But let's get into the rendering process a little bit. You guys with me so far? We all good? Anybody having trouble with where we're at? No? Okay, awesome. My digital friends, you guys all tucked in? Okay, just hell yes. Thank you for playing. All right, so time to start doing some rendering. If you go to Window, rendering editor, render settings. What that's going to do is open up kind of the rules for what it is we want to render. This is where we explain to Maya and the rendering engine what it is we want to do. Now mine is already set for the Arnold renderer from last class, but if it's not, you click and then choose Arnold from the drop down. And you can see there's other renderers in here. You can see Maya's hardware render, the software render, Turtle. There's a couple of other fun little things in here. Again, they all just draw pictures of what you see. But we're going to be using the Arnold one, so make sure you've got it set for that. All right. Now, something else fun that you need to make sure of is that you are rendering from the correct camera, because with Maya, you can literally render from any camera you want, but you have to let it know which one you want. So if you scroll down, you'll notice that there's several tabs within the Arnold renderer. And on the first tab, the common tab, you'll scroll down a little bit, and you will see that in the section called renderable cameras, you can choose the render cam. You could choose, a different camera if you wanted to, but just choose the render cam there just so it knows which camera it is supposed to be rendering from. Now, I say supposed with a little emphasis, because sometimes Maya does not render from the camera I told it to, but I will show you how to work around that if it doesn't do that, because every once in a while it just won't do it, and that's okay. We can work around it. But point being, let it know I want to render from the render cam. So once that's set, we're going to open up our render view. So we go to same place, Window, Rendering Editors, Render View. And the render view is, again, just kind of like looking through your little camera lens at what it is you're actually going to make a render of. And there's some fun buttons in here, but let's start with the very first one, which is Render Current Frame. And what happens is, if you look at the button, it looks kind of like a film slate, like you would see at the beginning of a shot. So you just click on that, and it will render what the camera is looking at in theory. So something to be aware of, because you can see right here, wait a minute, I'm looking at my, excuse me, looking at my shot here, and it looks way tighter than that. So, Maya is rendering from the wrong camera, because that does happen. Now, if you don't want to wait for your render to stop, you want to stop it right away because you can already tell it's chosen the wrong camera, you can hit the escape key, upper left-hand corner on your keyboard. Escape terminates a render. Not immediately, but pretty soon after you press it, so just be aware. And the reason that's important is because if you're doing a render that's several minutes long and you already know it's rendering the wrong thing, you don't want to waste that time. So stop the render by hitting escape. But what is interesting is it will tell you what frame you're rendering. It'll let you know what you're rendering with, the size of the render, where it's rendering from, wrong one, and it will tell you, most importantly, how long is that render taking. So this current render, where I'm at right now, 24 seconds. Does that make sense? Very important that you keep tab of how long each of your renders takes. They will, as you increase the complexity, increase in the amount of time it takes to do that render. So if your assignment is due in 3 minutes and your current render time is 5 minutes, is that going to work? No, that's a problem. So again, keep close tabs on your render times and make sure you're going to finish before it's due, because that does happen. All right. So as I was saying, Maya has rendered from the wrong camera, but I'm not too sad because I know that this is, again, it's an issue that happens sometimes with more recent versions of Maya, where this icon does not give me what I want. But the good news is that same icon is on the main interface, and as with all things in Maya, if the sort of periphery windows aren't doing the job they're supposed to, somehow the main interface windows, they work. So what I'm going to do is just click this icon here on the main interface, same one, and now, oh, lo and behold, it's rendering what I wanted it to render. That nice image of my pepper shaker, or pepper grinder. Whatever that thing, I'm pretty sure it's a pepper grinder.
Well, you called it peppermint for so long.
Did I call it peppermint? You know what?
Changed it, so
Well,
that's what-
here's the thing. I haven't been sleeping a whole lot lately, so I'm not even sure I'm here right now. Am I here right now? Yes. I'm sorry. Could you guys keep it down just a little bit? I'm missing an excellent question. Go ahead. The exact same icon as I clicked in the render view, but on the main interface. So if you look up where, actually you can see where my cursor is, right now it's currently under the menu item deform. You'll see it looks like the film slate. It's another white box with the little action. Yes. Yes, absolutely. If you follow that row all the way down, you'll see there's like a thin white line with a little bit of a thicker white line on it. That allows you to sort of show and collapse that stuff. But if you reset your Maya preferences, that should throw them all back out again. So it's still rendering, and here's where you start to hear the fan inside your computer go on, because your computer has never worked so hard as when you're rendering. It's doing so much math, the graphics card heats up, and then the fan's got to kick on, so it sounds like it's going to take off. It's pretty funny. So if you take a look here, we can see, oh yeah, that looks like the angle that I chose. And I'm currently looking at a 1 minute, 21 second render time. So how far is the object from the camera starting to come into play in terms of how long my render time is? Does that make sense? Okay. So now I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, that looks pretty cool, but I can't really see the thing that I'm trying to show off. You know, the desk looks pretty cute. I like the lighting and that's pretty neat. But this really isn't where I want this to be. I'd like to actually get it more in the light. So the good news is I can actually move stuff around and do a series of renders until I find the one that I like. Now the important thing though is you want to hang on to, and I want to stress hang on, not save, but hang on to some of my renders so I can do a comparison. There's two icons here, and they're basically hang on to an image and get rid of an image. And they're right over here to the left of where you choose the rendering engine you're using in the render view. And what I'm going to do is hang on to this image by clicking this larger icon here on the left. And what that does is it captures that image for me so I can use this slider on the bottom to do a comparison between future renders. And I can have like a whole bunch of images. I think I've had like 50 in there at a time, and they're all still in there. So I don't know what the limit is, but you can get a whole bunch in there. But so here's this image, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this object. I'm going to scoot it over here and tuck it in over there a little bit. And then I'm going to do another render. And again, I'm not going to click this icon because I know that one's not giving me what I want. So I'm going to click this icon here, same one, but on the main interface. And then Maya will start doing its thing. And something interesting that Brian and I are very excited about is the fact that it renders from the middle now, which is cool, because that's really probably what you're most interested in anyway. Rendering engines used to be like, let's render there first and then over here. And then, so I could tell right away when things are going amok. So that's actually kind of cool. I don't know how they work that out. But now, oh, okay, that looks a little bit better. That's actually showing off the thing that I built. It looks a little bit nicer based on this new placement. Can you open the desk drawer? Yeah, if there are parts on there that move, if you want to, sure. Oh yeah, no, it might not have opening parts. I had a couple of guys from the finals department model this desk for me, so I don't even know what they built it to do. I just said make it look very nice, UV it, and I need it by Thursday. Yes. Do you have it set for the Arnold renderer? Okay, I'll have to come take a quick look at yours in a minute. Give me 1 second. All right. So I'm rendering Now I'm at 1 minute 22 seconds for this render. And as I said, the handy thing about being able to hang on to an image is the fact that I can now use this slider and do a comparison between the two and kind of decide what I want. Now, after doing that, I might say, okay, I kind of like where this thing is, but I'd like to kind of change the angle of my pepper mill so that because I don't really, I'd like to swing this part around over here a little bit and see if that looks any better. So I'm going to hang on to this picture, and then I'm going to come back over here, use my rotate tool, and just rotate it a little bit. Now, I'm pretty good with the placement of my pepper mill, but I wanted to just move a couple of parts, but I don't want to wait a whole minute and 20 seconds for the whole image to render. I just want to see how that one little part looks now. So what I'm going to do, again, is make sure I hang on to this image, and then I'm going to render just this little area here. So what I'm going to do is with my left mouse button, I'm literally going to draw a little box around the area I want to render. And then I'm going to click this other icon over here, which is render the selected field. And it's literally going to render just what's inside the box. And this is going to take me much less time, so I can sort of speed to what it is I want to see. Does that make sense? No, that's fine. You just have to render from the other camera. Use this icon up here. No, move this out of the way. No. Click off of there. There you go. Click that icon. It's the same one. Yes. Did you draw a box around the thing? Did you move your camera? Okay, because if you move your camera, you're changing your view. I didn't move my camera. I just redrew the little bit of area that I wanted to see. Does that make sense? Okay, and then I can hang on to that image if I want to. And again, I could do a comparison and see how does that affect my scene. You know, I've got new shadow information based on its position. Say, you know what? I don't really like it there. Maybe I'll put it over here. Maybe that'll look better. Again, hang on to that image, render just that little field, and you'll notice I didn't move my camera, I just moved the object, because I like the framing, I like where everything is, I just kind of wanted to tinker with the object. Now, different idea, if I didn't like the camera shot, I could move the camera to an entirely new location, render the entire frame, and then do a comparison, which camera shot did I like better? That's also okay. But we're looking at two different things there. You're not rendering a field for that one. Does that make sense? So we're kind of trying to develop a workflow where we're not doing anything too complex or too time consuming too soon. All right. So now this is looking a little bit better. I kind of like the way I can see the details of that piece more. Render time is actually less now. That's interesting. Oh, that's right, because I just rendered a small area. So I'm going to hang on to that image, and then I'm going to do one more of the whole thing and just see where I'm at in terms of render time and so forth. But I'm sort of working my way towards what I want to do. Does that make sense? Just, again, like drawing. You start with the broad strokes and you work your way towards the finer ones. This is much the same. Yes? Well, you probably hit your render button because that's what the screen looks like when it's rendering, when it's actually trying to create the image. But let me tell you guys right up front, in terms of rendering, this is the most intensive processor power your computer is going to use. So if you haven't turned it off and turned it on recently, that's not good. If you haven't shut down Maya recently, not good. And I would strongly recommend when you're in the rendering phase, turn off your screensavers, turn off hibernation, turn off, you don't want to be like surfing the web or working on other applications. When you're rendering, you want your computer doing absolutely nothing but rendering. You want all of its processor power and capability all being centered on this one thing, and that's creating an image. Yes, and plug it in. Thank you. Make sure your laptop is plugged in. Don't do it unplugged, because apparently it's using a different graphics card when it's unplugged versus plugged to maximize power efficiency, and it's not as good a quality. So a lot of things go amok. So make sure you, thank you, Brian. Make sure you plug that thing in, because that's definitely a big help. All right, I thought I saw some questions and then they went away. Did you get, yes. Yes, it's a still render. It's not a moving image. Yep, we are creating like a photograph. This is not in motion. Now, if it was supposed to be a moving image, like if this is an animation where I'm like zooming in on my Peppermill or I'm moving around from side to side, it would be just like this, but instead of creating one image, we would create many. 24 images would make 1 second. And it would actually render them one after the next in what we call a batch render. And then we would be able to watch them all at one time, hit play, and then they would put them all together and it would look like it was moving. That would be moving. All right. Now, once you feel like you're getting kind of close to what you want, you know, the image is starting to look interesting, and you feel like, all right, now it's time for me to start kind of creating my final image. What you're going to want to do is go back to your render settings, and we're going to increase the quality. So first I want to make sure I hang on to this image here. So I'm going to hit my little hang on to an image button there. And then I'm going to go to Windows, Rendering Editors, Render Settings. And I'm going to go over to the tab called Arnold Renderer. And this first category here, Camera AA, think of that as quality, anti-aliasing. I'm trying to increase the quality of my render, which means we're talking about a more detailed drawing. And as a result, that means more time. Anytime you're taking more time, drawing more detail, it will take longer. Now, you've noticed that it defaults at 3. All right, 3 what? I have no idea. Doesn't matter. It's an arbitrary value. If I want it to increase the quality, what do you think I need to do? Go up or down? I need to go up, right? More. That's better, right? That's what they tell us anyway. So point being, it's at 3, so I know I need to go up. Well, in terms of anything in Maya, and I don't care what you're doing, if you are working with an attribute that has an open field where you have to put a number in, you want to work in halves and doubles. Does that make sense? Halves and doubles. If you need more of something, double it. If you need less of something, cut it in half. The reason being, when you're testing and you're trying to find your way through something, if you don't like a setting, if you hit Z, Maya's not going to go, oh yeah, that used to be a 3, and put the 3 back in there. Does that make sense? It's not going to remember that. But if you know you're working in halves and doubles, if I put 6 in there and that's too much, I know exactly what it used to be. It used to be 3. Does that make sense? That's just smart using Maya. So it's currently at 3. I want more quality, so I'm going to put a 6 in there and see what I get. So again, highlight the number, plug in a 6. Okay, close that. Again, make sure you've got a copy of the original there, and then I'm going to render again. Now this one, because I'm asking for more quality, I'm asking for a better drawing, I'm asking for more detail, more information, you know it's going to take longer. That's the trade-off. I will end up with a better quality image, in theory, but I'm going to have to wait. And you can already see I've only got this one little section rendered so far. So it's going to take a little bit. Is this making sense? Rendering process, rendering workflows? Yeah. Oh, try resetting. Go to the Maya preferences, and then up under Edit, Restore Default. Did that pop them back out for you? Okay, make sure you hit Save, because that takes you back to sort of your factory fresh. So, yes. Oh, that's in the Arnold tab. It's the second tab over when you go to your render settings, Window, Rendering Editors, Render Settings. It's the next tab over. And again, if I'm rendering and I'm going, oh, wait a minute, this is taking way too long, I'm not happy, I need to stop it, what do I press? Escape. Remember that one, because that's a big deal, because you might be caught in a render that will take who knows how long. So you got to be able to get out of that if it's taking too long. Yes. All right, I'll come back and take a look. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I will take a look. The longest render I ever had? Well, I'd say probably the longest render I ever had was because it was an animation, so there was a lot of moving stuff. That was a couple of hours. And even that, not that bad. Like if you think of the movie Transformers, one frame of that movie took 40 hours to render. And that's one frame. A 24th of a second took 40 hours to render. So, you know, I don't complain about it. It does. It does. Oh, incidentally, with regard to the fans, thank you for reminding me. Do yourself a favor and don't leave your laptop like sitting on the rug when the fans are going, because that bottom gets really hot. What I'll do when I'm rendering is I'll actually put stuff under my laptop so I can get some airflow under there. Yeah, they do have coolers if you can afford one of those. I just put a couple of books under there and let it ride on that. Just let some airflow underneath. No ice water, Brian. No, that's a bad idea. No, we don't do that. Hit escape. All right, close that window. And I want you to let me see. Go to Window, Rendering Editors, Render Settings. You were on Arnold. Oh, you set it for 6 though, so that's going to take way longer. Put that back to 3. Yes, but yours might take longer than mine. So yeah, that's why you were waiting a long time. And like I said, if it's taking way too long, you might need to restart your machine. Just turn it off and turn it on again, because they don't like to be up all night like you don't like to be up all night. Like I don't like to be up all night, but sometimes I have to. All right, we're slowly getting there. All right, I've only got. That's what I meant. Turn off hibernation. Turn off your social media. You know, the last thing you want is somebody popping in. Sup, bro? Yeah, I'm rendering, bro. Exactly. So yeah, just shut off everything. You really kind of want to isolate yourself. And honestly, render time is kind of, look at it as me time, because you have been working so hard on being efficient with your models, being efficient with your textures, you know, nice lighting, good camera setup. You've worked so hard. Now you press the render button and you literally can't do anything while it's rendering. You just, that's idle time. And that's sort of the time you've earned to do whatever you want. So you want to, you know, dance like nobody's watching with Pop-Tarts. That's the time to do it. So enjoy that render time because you earned it. Yes. Oh yeah, you can do that. You can turn your Wi-Fi off and render. They're not related to any internet activity, so you can absolutely do that. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. All right, so now if you take a look, I'm looking at 5 minutes and 28 seconds for one frame. So you can see by upping that quality, that really increased how much time it took to make that render, right? But, well, here's the thing, does it or doesn't it? And here's where we can actually use our little slider and do a comparison and say, you know, does it actually look better? When I look at it, am I seeing a significant increase in quality? You know, and for me, I'm looking at this and I really don't see a difference between the two. You know, sometimes you'll see it and sometimes you won't. Where I will typically look to see the best in terms of changes, I'll look in the edges of shadows and in the quality of shadow cast by the object, because that's really where you're going to see a lot of the, if there is any improvement, that's where you'll see it. Look at really smooth curvature on objects, because sometimes you'll see it there as well. But when I flip through here between my current render setting of 6 and the previous one of 3, I'm really not seeing a significant difference. So for me, I'm going to put it back to 3, because if I can get that thing done in a minute and a half, I'd rather. Does that make sense? And that's where you kind of have to make that call, because you might say, oh, wow, from 3 to 6, that's a dramatic increase in quality. I really like how smooth it is. I wonder what 12 would look like, right? And then you up it to 12, and then, you know, 6 years later when it's done rendering, you come back and take a look, and you do your little comparison, and then you go, yeah, you know what though? Not worth it. I have to render a long time to get to that. And it's not significant enough of an increase of quality. Not a good use of time. Does that make sense? And you can imagine once you get all those settings in place, if you were doing an animation, you would be rendering a whole bunch of frames. So each one would take that kind of time. So that's why you got to be efficient with the one image. Make sure you got it looking great. And then you know, okay, I've done everything I can to make it as efficient and tight as I can. Now I'm going to move forward and start doing renders. And again, in terms of render times and the fact that you can't do anything while you're rendering, there are people whose job it is, like literally this is a position. Your job is to optimize renders. That's all they do. They get scenes that are done and ready to go. What can I do to make this render faster? Because it's all about faster. So, you know, that's a gig right there, just making stuff render more quickly. So again, once you're happy, things are looking good, then now we can actually save the file. Does that make sense? Now we're going to save it. So these are the steps for saving your image. And incidentally, when it comes to that week 4 assignment 2 turn-in, where you're rendering out your scene with this stuff in it, I'm getting an image from you, but I'm also getting the Maya file. Please don't forget to give me the Maya file. Does that make sense? I need that. Make sure I'm getting the Maya file. And of course, if you've got objects that have been UV'd and you're going to put your AO pass on there, make sure the AO pass texture images are in the source images folder, and you make sure that gets to me as well, because otherwise I won't be able to recreate what you did. And I would love to be able to show other classes, hey, look at what this person did. You know, that's actually a tremendous honor to have your work chosen to be shown as an example to other classes. And literally, I have been in interviews where I talked to my interviewer and I told them stuff like that, and they were like, they're so jazzed, because that's really, it's a nice thing to say. That does not happen often. So always a good opportunity to get your name out there and have people see what you can do and learn from your work. I mean, you know, I don't know, in my opinion, if I can teach somebody with something that I did, that's awesome. That, yep. No, absolutely. Anything you can do, any teaching tool, I try to come up with stuff, and that just makes a difference. It's really cool. So let's go in, I'm sorry, I digress. Let's go into how do we save the image? Now that I'm really happy, I like what I see in my render viewer, how do I save it? Very simple process. You go to File, Save Image. And this is where you actually save it, because prior to this, we didn't really save anything. We hung on to it. So we say Save Image. Now, in terms of where it's going to go, it's going to send it to the images folder of wherever I've set my project. So make sure you're taking note of that. There's nothing more frustrating than not knowing where your stuff is. I made this render, where the heck is it? So in this instance, it's going to go to my images folder. And of course, you want to name it. And we're going to use the naming convention for 3DF. This is my final render. 3DF 1801 if you're taking this class in January. And the big ticket item, and I can't stress this enough, I want you to save it as a TIFF, as the image type. And you'll notice that there are many image types in here, and you actually have to scroll in the drop down to get to TIFF. It's alphabetical, so you're going to have to go all the way down to T. Sorry. But I want a TIFF image, so make sure you give me that one. If you give me an image of any other type, you will get a 0 for the render. If you give me an image of any type other than TIFF, you will get a 0 for the render. Does that make sense? I do it twice. I think 3 borders on insulting, but I think twice is I gotcha. So make sure you're giving me the right type. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, you will often be given very specific technical directions in terms of when you create this thing for me, make sure it's this file type, that file type, because it's being used further in other aspects of a production pipeline, like compositing. And they're going to be asking you for specific image types. Our web platform does not support types other than this. This gives us the best quality image. This application that we're going to bring it into next does not accept files of this or this type. That's why we need this one specifically. Does that make sense? It becomes a big deal because not every application uses every file type. Not every web platform supports every file type. You've got to find what works. Does that make sense? So when you're given specific instructions, you've got to follow those because otherwise then they've got to do more work. They got to fix whatever it is you've done, and there could be some compression involved with that, which is going to degrade the quality of the image. Does that make sense? Very important that we give our employers, whether we're freelancer on staff, what they ask for, because that helps them do their job. Which one? Where?
In render view.
In my render view. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me do this first. Hang on one second. So again, you choose TIFF for its file type and you hit save. All right. And then of course what happens is, and you should double check this, when you go to your folder, go to your images folder, and there's that image that you're going to turn in. Does that make sense? But don't forget the Maya file, because I'm getting that too. I know, it went right to my images folder, so I know where it is. And again, if I've got an AO pass that goes on my Peppermill, that's going to be in my source images folder because Maya's looking for that. So the whole thing is sort of a contained package. Here's my file scene. Does that make sense? Very simple, very straightforward, but there are steps that have to be followed to ensure the fluidity of it. Okay? Now, the only difference between what we just did here today and what you will be doing for your week 4 project 2 is it's just going to be with your stuff, not the Peppermill. Does that make sense? That is the only difference. You're going to be importing the stuff that you built and putting it into this final scene. There won't be a Peppermill in there. So if you're using this file, get rid of the Peppermill. If you're using the file that goes with the assignment, there's no Peppermill in there, so you don't have to worry about it. But you will be importing the assets that you built through the course of the month. anything that is an actual modeled asset, no blockouts, no jar, no Peppermill. It's got to be stuff that you built. And again, if you want to have them be UV'd assets and put an AO pass on them, that's totally fine, but that is completely optional. Yes? No, if you close that, I think they're gone. I'm pretty sure they're gone. So I'm very careful to not do that. But that's a good question.
Is the render view known for crashing on it like the material editors?
Not that I've seen, but that doesn't mean that doesn't happen. Does that make sense? Because here's the thing. We download most of our files wirelessly. We've pretty much become a wireless nation, right? Because who likes cables? And I mean, if you've ever been on a phone and you've had a phone call drop, just by a show of hands, how many of you have been on a cell phone and had a phone call drop and get interrupted in the middle, right? It's pretty much everybody in the room. That's wireless technology. That's what we are utilizing. You know, Bluetooth, wireless, microwaves, it's all working off the similar principle, if not the same. Just like you can have a dropped call, when you are downloading a file wirelessly, the signals fluctuate. There's fluctuations within the power and the strength of the signal. You can lose some data in that file transfer. Does that make sense? So you can end up with a file that has 1 or 2 quirks in it, because it doesn't take much to kind of throw stuff off. Now, if I take an Ethernet cable and plug that right into the router and plug that right into my laptop, way less frequency of that kind of thing happening. We don't always have that luxury, but just so you know, wireless is not as perfect as they lead us to believe. Does that make sense? Because they'll advertise it as the cat's pajamas, but it still has problems, like anything else. So just be aware. Does that mean that that's not really a thing? It could be on yours. That could be a thing. But, you know, could re-downloading it be the solution? Yeah, that could very well be the thing. Just download another copy of it. Yep. But good question. I like that one. Yeah. Oh, yeah, let me take a look. I don't remember having seen that, so I'm going to go take a look and see what's going on. But I would encourage you guys, always explore. Just figure out, you know, what does it do? Where is it?
It's render view. It's like the third application over under.
Oh, in the main interface. Okay. Window, rendering editors.
Render view. It's in render view, like on the interface.
Oh, it is in the render view. Okay. Yeah, that's where I was looking. And where?
The third one over, down, underneath. Like
It looks like a camera.
it looks like a camera icon. That one.
Oh, screenshot.
Oh, it says snapshot on
Yeah. Oh, is it snapshot?
it. It says snapshot on it.
Okay. Well, what I'm seeing with that, though, is it looks like a hardware render. Because when I click that, I'm getting basically a wireframe image. Let me just see if I put mine into wireframe and I don't select it, what do I get when I do that? Interesting. Instant wires, which I guess you could use to superimpose through compositing the wire flow of your model, because you could do a series of images of the thing in motion and lit, and then a series of images with its wireframes, and then composite the two on top of each other.
Send it to your direction and say, hey, is this good edge flow?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Quality.
Interesting. Not something I've ever played with, but play with it, of course. Always. I encourage you guys to explore. That's why I don't show you a ton of hotkeys, because I want you to look around. Does that make sense? If you only knew the hotkey for render, you'd have never seen that. So that's why I don't do all hotkeys. I definitely give you some ones that are important, but I try to avoid them in general, just so you can explore more.
What do you do if you're trying to see image, but you don't see file type on a tip?
It's there. You just have to scroll down.
Oh,
It's there.
it's not.
I'll go take a look, but I bet you $5 it's there. I got to make lunch money somehow.
That's right.
Go ahead.
So when we're saving this, and it should be saved as a tip.
Yes.
When we're saving like an AO pass.
Yes.
If we wanted to do that, should that be a specific file type?
Well, if you generate a AO pass using Arnold, it creates an EXR file, and that is the file type it utilizes. So we can't set it for something else, but that's just Arnold. I've created AO passes using Mental Ray, and you can get TIFFs and Targas and whatever. You can choose file type. So it's dependent on the rendering engine you're using. So, but that's a great question. You know, is there some way to change that due to compatibility things? Yeah. So like if somebody tells you, hey, I need a TIFF file for your the image that you're creating, but I want you to generate it utilizing Arnold. You go, wait a minute, but Arnold makes EXRs. Do you want me to convert that then? Does that make sense? So knowing how that stuff works is really important. Yeah.
When I generated one and it was an EXR, it didn't like upload properly when I wanted to pass on there, so I had to export it and convert it to a TIFF.
Yep. It's crazy. Sometimes you got to find ways to make it work. You know what I mean? And that's the frustrating thing about working with technology is some things work fluidly and smoothly as advertised and some don't. But the bottom line is you still have to get your job done. And honestly, if you talk to employers in the industry and they tell you about Full Sail graduates and what they can do, one of the things that they are very, very impressed by is how self-sufficient Full Sail students are when they bring them in. We are definitely troubleshooters and problem solvers because you have to be. You cannot survive in this place without those skills. So that is something that I've heard again and again and again from employers, that they love how independent we are and how we can solve problems, because that is a big piece of the industry. Because you can't always go get somebody, you know, so you got to work this stuff out sometimes. So, you know, there's not always somebody you can go find, or they have the time or what have you. So the more you can do on your own, definitely to your advantage. So I encourage you, use the help documents, Google stuff. I mean, there's a wealth of information out there. And it's amazing if somebody else has had the same problem than you, boom, you get into these forums and then all of a sudden you're learning, you know, and you're part of what's going on right now in terms of making stuff happen. So it's very cool when you can do that. So good on you. Any other quick questions? I just want to go over that and take a quick look at the TIFF issue. No? Okay, hang on one second. Look, click on this drop-down menu.
And there's
Scroll down. Scroll down. Keep going. TIFF. I accept cash or checks. All right. Boom, skill check. All right, now, in terms of what we've learned how to do, we've learned how to create a render of a scene with objects in it. We know how to do that. We know how to tinker with the camera perspective. We know how to make adjustments to the quality of the render. That's what we figured out today. Previously, we learned how to create an AO pass, right? We learned how to do that. So the skill check for lecture 10, we're going to bring those two things together, because that's pretty much what culminates in what you're going to do for, if you want to use an AO pass, what you're going to do for your week 4 assignment 2. Bring those objects in and make sure you can plug in that AO pass and get it to work. And again, the key there is the rendered texture has to go into the source images folder, and you have to set your project, obviously, so Maya can find it. So the key is, when I've got this environment, right, I've got this scene with a desk in it, and I import objects into it, I then have to copy the texture from the file that it's in, the AO pass image, and then paste that into the source images of this new file system for this bigger project that I have, because everything has to be self-contained. Does that make sense? So you got to bring that across. So your skill check is, let's bring those two things together. So if you've got an AO pass for your pepper mill, you can utilize that. If you did an AO pass for your jar, you can utilize that. But what I want to see you guys being able to do is bring that asset in. If we're talking about the jar, pepper mill's already in there, and utilize that texture to create the AO pass within your rendered final scene, because that is the most complicated it could be in terms of what you're trying to accomplish for that week 4 assignment 2. Does that make sense? Yes.
The pepper mill on the desk, you just want to use the AO that we already created, or would you prefer to still export?
No, you can use the AO you've already created because the UVs are the same, or they should be. And I'm pretty sure that one's UV. Select it first and check. It is UV'd? Okay, then it should be the same, because that's the beauty of that AO pass, because it's generated based on the UV shells. So as long as we're using the same object, I can bring that texture anywhere and it's going to match. Now, if I change that pepper mill, if I did some extrusions and moved some stuff around, that texture would no longer be applicable. Does that make sense? So, but that is kind of the neat thing about it. Yeah, go ahead. Well, no, you don't have to. That's actually what he was asking about, because the UVs are the same on the 2 pepper mills. So you could literally take the AO pass texture that you already created and just put that into the source images folder, connect it to the color channel of the material for the pepper mill. It's on. Does that make sense? That work is already done. You will have to create the material. You will have to plug the texture into the color channel, but it should work right from there. And then you go right back to the rendering thing. Does that make sense? And this, again, you just kind of getting the feel for how this self-contained file system works and how you make a project happen. Because there's all kinds of stuff you need to make that final image. And that's what we're working for. Sweating, bleeding, crying, and cursing for. But we got to get all that stuff into one file, because then that's ready to go. It's the bundle. Here it is. Ah.
And we need all that information.
Yep. Make sure we get that stuff. Very, very important. I need that rendered texture. I need the rendered image. I need the Maya file. Because if you take a look at the self-grade document, it talks about, hey, did you freeze transformations on your geometry? Week 4 assignment 2. One of the things it asked, did you freeze the transformations? Because when you bring that stuff in, you're going to move it around and position it. If it's the wrong size because you didn't do the scale in advance, you're going to have to scale it so they are all the correct size relative to each other, because scale is a graded component of that aspect. You know, so there's transformations on there. Well, how would I ever know if you froze your transformations from looking at just an image? So obviously I need the Maya file. Does that make sense? So make sure you're looking at that self-grade document. There's a lot of very helpful hints in terms of giving you answers to some in terms of what you need. And always, why not go to the Google Hangout if you're not sure? Just pop in. It's super easy. You just click the big button that says help on it, and you're magically transported to help land. And there's almost always an instructor in there. Definitely almost always a person in there you can talk to. So that's always, it's helpful. Definitely. That's why they call it help. If it wasn't helpful, they'd call it something else. Not helpful. Exactly. Or the living hell button. Let's press that one. Exactly. Gesundheit. A lot of sneezing today. Have you guys been drinking out of each other's glasses lately? Don't do that. Flu season is rough right now. Even my digital friends, be careful out there. Dr. Oz says, wash your hands a lot, don't touch your face, and get plenty of sleep. I can do 2 of those. I could do 2 of them. Yeah. All right. Any questions about your skill check and what you need to do? I think you guys are pretty good on that. Yeah? Okay. All right. So that's all the information I want to or need to talk about today. But like I said, next class we're going to get together and we're going to talk about Again, making pretty rectangles. How do I make my work stand out? Because the bottom line is, most likely, you're not modeling anything new under the sun. You're not the only person with an X-wing on your demo reel. There's a lot of people with X-wings on their demo reel. So the difference is, how do I make my X-wing look better? How do I set my work apart so that I catch somebody's eye? Because that is how you get an opportunity to try to get a job. Because the bottom line is, this is a job you have to fight and win. There's a lot of people who want to do this line of work. It is highly, highly competitive. You have to win these jobs. They're not just laying around. You don't fill out a form and you're in. This is a whole other line of work. This is different. You are competing for jobs. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to talk about presentation and how important that is in terms of catching somebody's eye and getting work, because that's the goal. You want to get work, by far, most important thing. And actually what's nice is, by the time you guys finish your portfolio class, you got 3DF first, then you got model creation, then you go into your portfolio class, you should be able to try to earn freelance work from that point on as a modeler. So you could literally try to get into that mix, try to sell models to TurboSquid, try to get models out there, try to get people to hire you to build stuff for them. There's a buck to be made there. So it'd be pretty cool if you could drag down some work while you're here at school. Not to mention tremendous experience, and makes your resume look delicious. All righty. Any questions before we wrap things up for today? Lecture 10 going once. There, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's correct. I need the, if you do, yeah, well, for the skill check, yes, because you have to do an AO pass. So yes, I will need the texture. Yes, I will need the Maya file, and yes, a render, so I can see, and you can see the advantage of putting an AO on something when you render it, because you'll see it really pops the object out from the rest of the background, and that's a big part of, look at my stuff.
You still have to adjust
Oh, you do? Wherein lies the problem?
when you put the AO map on the previous assignment,
Mhm.
skill check,
Yes.
you have to move UIs, so it's probably better to just export your one you did before.
You have to adjust what though?
You have to move the UVs so that you don't have those seams in the UI.
Oh, you still have to tuck them in. Yeah, that's correct. When you guys did the AO pass for the Peppermill, we had to kind of like tuck in the last little couple of rows of UVs just to make sure we didn't have the seams on there. So obviously that adjustment would not be on the new one. You'd have to do that again, or delete the Peppermill that's in there, bring in the one you've already done that work for. So, yep. Yeah, no, that's good. That is definitely to everyone's advantage to know that. So hopefully they're watching and saw and heard and heeded the warning. Anything else? Lecture 10 going once? Yep, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. You can absolutely do that. Yep, and that's what he was talking about. You don't have to adjust the UVs again to fix the seams. So you can just bring that, just delete the Peppermill that's in there, bring the other one in that you already did the work for. That's totally fine. But remember to copy and paste the textured, rendered to texture image that you created the AO with. Make sure you put that in the source images folder of the render activity file so that it can find it. Because that's the big ticket item. It's got to be able to find the texture. Yeah, good question, so I like it. All right, lecture 10 going once. Lecture 10 going twice. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go. No, that's fine. I'd rather you ask. Go ahead. If you want to, if you're like, you know what, I don't want to do the Peppermill. That's too easy. Not my style. I want to do something more cool. Yeah, by all means. You want to bring something else in that you've created an AO pass for? By any means, do so. What I want you to see is the advantage of the AO pass when you add that to your render, what you net from it. Does that make sense? I want you to see how much more interesting your stuff looks. And then I think you'll appreciate it. And maybe you might decide, hey, you know what? I'd like my final image to have the AO pass on it. I think that'd be cool. And I have to UV a bunch of stuff anyway for my week 4 assignment 1. So why not utilize those? Good question, though. Absolutely.
Like,
Did you have a question?
yeah.
Okay.
Like literature too, when we have to bring in all the objects like I created, I could bring in anything I created.
As long as you modeled it, yes.
Like,
You can't do a block out. And you can't put the jar in.
That's what I mean, except for those jars.
Yes.
So like the spray bottle.
Yep, spray bottle is totally fine.
Well, everything except for the jar, like we did with like.
Exactly. Everything that is part of a week 1, week 2, or week 3 turn in. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't bring the zombie kill bus in. I'm sorry. No zombie kill buses. So I know. No snowman.
Not except for the snowman.
Exactly.
That was what you created.
Exactly. And that's why I don't want to see it again. I made it. So again, anything that was a week 1, week 2, or week 3 turn in, that's what's going to be in that final scene. So, but thank you for asking that, because I'm sure somebody out there was not sure. All right. Lecture 10 going once. Lecture 10 going twice. What? Go ahead. Well, the turtle only got to 3 before he bit it, so I guess you're going to have to do your own experiment. I did it, and it was like 998, I think, was what I got. Really? They must have a very big or very rough tongue. For me, it was like 900, but I think the question you have to ask there is, when you're trying to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, are we talking about completely exposing the center or just barely able to see it? You know, what volume of that middle do I have to see to qualify as reaching the center? So we will leave that to the scholars to debate. As with anything, what are the parameters? All right, lecture 10 going once. Lecture 10 going twice. Oh, go ahead. A separate question. Okay. Lecture 10 going once. Lecture 10 going twice. Sold. 1801. All righty, guys. Thank you very much. I will see you again on Saturday. We will be back in the room we're normally in, and we will talk about presentation and how to really make that last rendered image look great. And at that point, you will know everything you need to know to complete this class. So very exciting to get it all done. Thank you very much. You guys did terrific, and I will see you later. Hey, actually, you know, I did not have another copy of the attendance sheet. I've got to go get one. So you're good for right now, but I will get one. Thank you.
Steve, did you want to meet after lunch?
You know, let me see, because I've got to go run and get a new attendance hoo-ha. I might have enough time even before the next section starts. So, lab. Look, Brian, I unhooked it and turned it off. You didn't even have to ask.
My good boy gonna fall out of my chair.
I did good. Good, Miles.
I'm not a fast learner, Brian, but I don't give up. That's my angle. I don't. I have to actually go print one up. Yeah, no, I ran out today, which really bummed me out. But sure. Yeah, let me print out the thing first, though. Master schedule, time sheet, attendance.